You'll notice something a little different today. This is not going to be a project video where I'm building something. Instead, I am getting ready for a multi-part series on a new project, and I don't want to tell you what that project's going to be yet. Just wait, you'll find out. It's going to be really cool. But one of the things that I'm going to need for my project is my radial arm saw. And so I thought today I would do a little discussion about the radial arm saw, because there are videos on YouTube about the radial arm saw. They don't really tell you much. There's a couple that do, but they don't cover everything that this guy does. So this is my 1960s Craftsman radial arm saw. I actually have a second radial arm saw, but it's in my dad's shop. Of course, he's been ready for years for me to come get it. That belonged to my grandfather. That's actually an early 1940s radial arm saw as well. It uses huge blades. I believe it uses a 12, it'll do a 12-inch blade. It's a big, heavy-duty monster. And scary, oh my gosh, 220 volt, and the motor is just, it's scary. Trust me, it's scary. Alright, so this is my radial arm saw. What does a radial arm saw do? Well, it moves back and forth. How is that different than your sliding compound miter saws? It's not. Sliding compound miter saws these days do have that sliding, but they've only been doing that for the past few years. Can I do 45s with it? Yes, you can. Or the other direction. Yes, you can. Can I do compound miter with it? Why, of course you can. Look at that. So tell me, can your sliding compound miter saw cross cut 12 to 13 inches? Probably, if you have the higher end ones. How much did you pay for that higher end one, by the way? 400? 500? 600? I paid 120 bucks for mine. For my 1960s Craftsman radial arm saw. When this saw was first advertised, it was advertised by Craftsman as being one of the most versatile tools in your shop. It can cross cut. Fantastic at that. It is. It really is. It can rip cut. That's scary. Why is it scary? Well, look at this guy. This one is about, I think it's a 1.5 horse motor. This blade spins in that direction. So in other words, to cut it spins like that. Now imagine that spin, 3,500-ish RPMs, and you're pushing a board through this direction. What do you think is going to happen when this little guy, this piece of junk that they stick on there, doesn't grab? Which is more than likely going to happen. You notice I'm sitting here rubbing this thing across, and it's not even attempting to grab. This piece is useless. Well, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. It's going to say, oh man, this wood tastes like crap. I'm sick of this Home Depot wood. And it's going to spit it back at you. That's scary. Have I done rip cuts with this? Yeah, I have, but it was because my table saw was broken or I didn't have one yet. Is it scary? It really is. It's scary. I've seen older guys, let's say guys with more experience with these things, do it with no problem. Good for them. I'm going to stay away from it. Just too scary for my taste. Now, one of the other good things about this saw is this particular one came with an accessory drive. And all it is a half-inch threaded piece, threaded rod that comes out that's attached to, that's really the same rod. I mean, it goes all the way through the motor. That allows you to mount a Jacobson chuck that you can get for 10 to 15 bucks on this guy. Now you'll notice here, I have a hole saw arbor on it. The reason I have that hole saw arbor is really as an example. So you can take this sanding disc that you buy at Harbor Freight for like 6 or 7 bucks, I think, and it will screw onto that, and now you have a disc sander. And if you're smart about it, you can cut you a C-shaped piece of wood, clamp it down, push this guy back, lower it down, and use it as a disc sander. You can also mount a drum in it. I don't think I've ever done that. I don't know if I really have a need to. I have a drum sander set up on my drill press. Speaking of drill presses, guess what else this guy will do? This guy can also be spun around like this, and you can set a board on your fence, and you need to do concentric holes. Look at that. And that goes way deeper than my drill press does. Let's say I want to move my board. Let's say I want to move my board and do 45-degree holes for some crazy reason. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Now, according to Craftsman at the time, you could cross cut and you could rip cut, but it did other things too. Now, we've already covered the cross cutting. It's awesome at that. Now, there is a safety issue with the cross cutting that you hear about. I've never had it happen to me, and I think the reason is because I use sharp blades. I keep sharp blades on there. Well, let's say I put this dull blade on here, and again, the direction that it spins, look at that, it's like a car tire trying to pull itself along. Well, what happens if it grabs on the wood and you're just barely shaving just a little hair off or whatever, just making a thin groove? This guy could grab hold and come shooting towards you. Now, I have a bolt right here that is factory that is supposed to prevent that from happening. It will come shooting out here to the end, and bam, it hits that. Will it hold it? I don't know. I hope so. Never had to worry about it. Never really had an issue. So, ripping, we already talked about. Bad idea. Using it as a drill press works great. It does have the issue, though, that this motor spins at 3,500 RPM. I wouldn't put a hole saw on this bad boy. In fact, all I would use was regular drill bits, and even then, I use a smaller drill bit than what I need to drill the hole straight. And then I use a bigger drill bit to clean that out, because more than likely you're going to have burn marks. So cross-cutting, ripping, drill press, sanding disc. Another thing about that sanding disc is, if you don't want to use the hole saw arbor, which I don't, I was just showing you that but that's one thing you can do. You can also go to Home Depot. I haven't found it at Lowe's yet, but I've found it at Home Depot. And I think that's because, well, I don't know if Lowe's sells Milwaukee or not. Home Depot sells Milwaukee. And Milwaukee grinders use a M10 by 1.25 thread bolt, or arbor, which fits nothing. I don't know why they do that. They also sell this little adapter, which adapts that to the normal 5/8 that you find on all grinding stuff. You can buy that guy, screw it into this disc, get you an M10 by 1.25 bolt. This is not the one I usually use, but I have one that the head is cut off of, and then I used a hacksaw to cut a slot in it so that I could use a flat tip screwdriver to tighten it in now. Because once you cut the head off, you can't, if it gets jammed in there good, you can't get it out. So once that's done, it's screwed in all the way, it will go straight into that chuck. Say you had something you wanted to clean some rust off of. This will also screw on to that arbor that you've made. Look at that. Jam on, right? And yes, I know that one's wore out. It's just garbage. Just add it out for example. So what else can you do with one? Well, in one Craftsman ad at least, I saw this being used as a planer. I don't know if they still make it or not, but they used to make a special disc that would attach to this accessory drive. I'd have to take the chuck off and screw this piece on, turn the whole motor sideways, and you can do just like the guys are doing nowadays. They make these jigs that they attach a router to, and they just go back and forth and back and forth and plane that board down, right? If you had that adjustment, you could do the same thing. Turn the motor up, have that planer blade down, and just go back and forth. What this machine is really good at is going back and forth. I have heard of guys using these with those molding discs on these. Super scary looking. Not for me. I have wondered though, they do make a grinder disc that has a chainsaw chain wrapped around it that they use for carving, power carving. And actually, now that I think about it, not recently, it's been a little while, but the Wood Whisperer had a piece that went on his grinder, and he was making a chair seat, I believe it was. So I bet those would mount on this as well. So maybe just give you a few more options on what you can do with one of these. For me, I just stick to cross-cutting. If I do have a small piece that I need to rip cut that's shorter than this table, and let's just say I just need to take just a sliver off of it. You know, there's some stuff that I do inlay on, and I'll take a piece of walnut, and I don't want to mess up the whole piece of walnut just to get just a sliver off. So what I will do is I've made this board here, cut perfect 90 degree. It can go up against my fence. I have a small clamp that fits down in here. And now I can cut just the tiniest sliver off the side of that board. That sliver just falls over on the table. My table saw, it gets sucked down into the table. Never to be seen again. Well, at least until it clogs up the dust port and I have to take the thing apart. So I keep that up here, and I keep it marked what it is so I don't accidentally throw it away like we ever throw away scraps, right? So it's good for that too. Now, is it worth it? You'll see on Facebook, other places where a newbie will ask, hey, is a radial arm saw a good deal? Should I get one of those for my shop? Almost all the answers, sadly, are no, it's horrible. It's unsafe. It's a ridiculous machine. Don't ever buy one. Well, here's my thought on it. I think it's a good machine. I think it's a great thing to buy. I think that often you can do pretty much everything on a table saw. But you know, when you cut dados on that table saw in a cross-cut manner, it's often hard to see where your lines are because you have to look over it and you have to get it all adjusted just right and everything. I stick that board up here with my dados set in. I can see exactly where it's going to cut. Zoom, zoom. I'm done. Now, is it accurate for depth? I don't think it's as accurate for depth. I wish it were more accurate for depth, but it works really well. You just have to play with it. Get to know your machine. And that's my biggest piece of advice on this is get to know your machine. Understand it. Can't be scared of it, but you got to have enough fear to save yourself from getting hurt.